controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind. Tinfoil hat.
Yeah, and welcome to another episode of Tinfoil Hat. You know who I am. You know what I'm here to do. Join me as always is XG in the place to be. How are you, XG?
Good, man.
We got a good week of shows. You got 3 episodes coming this week because we love you. All of them are unique in their own way, and they're going to be great. Real quick, I just want to talk about the big show next week. Next Tuesday night at the Comedy Store is Absolute Extract presents the Comedy Chaos live April 30th at the Comedy Store. Just go to thecomedystore.com. Check out our boys at abx.org. They have everything you want, the latest in any flower, vape pens, lip balm weed, you name it, they got it. They are the top shelf of marijuana. They come in and it's like Weed Santa every other Tuesday at the Comedy Store. Everybody's leaving with something, make you feel better about yourself. So please go check out our good friends at abx.org. Without them, this show would not be possible. I also want to thank our good friends at BetDSI. BetDSI for all your bet needs. Just use the promo code HAT100 and with this code, the customer gets 100% match cash bonus up to $500, and we got everything on. NBA playoffs are off the hook. Golf is great. UFC. I bet you can make bets on who's going to get drafted. That's this Thursday. All that and more at our good friends at BetDSI, betdsi.com. New t-shirts are up. Also, go to tinfoilhattshirts.com and you'll be able to get all the t-shirts you want. All the new ones are popping up. Look at that. We got the Arizona one, Samzilla, the Ronin, Clockwork Orange, and more being put up every day. We're going to give you a variety. It's a great way to support the show. And, of course, the Patreon is growing and growing and growing. Go to patreon.com/tinfoilhat. Enjoy the group. Now, before I bring in our guest, I just want to say real quick, on the last episode, I would like to thank Nuno and Sarah at Shookum Films for making the new intro. I didn't play it today because we're figuring out how to run it within the studio. So you can see it. Shookum Films is an international film and video company based in Europe, which operates worldwide. And make sure to check them out at Shookum Films. It's SKUOOKUM-films.com, and you can contact them and ask them for a free quote for any of your video needs. Also, check out Sarah's website at sarahbmora, MOURA.com, where you can get her Make Comedy Offensive Again hat, which I really love. Nuno is an award-winning filmmaker, and we will have him on the show very soon. And Shookum is another name for Bigfoot. Coincidentally, that is the theme of today's show, an episode which they helped make happen by getting in touch with our guest today. And our guest today is, I'm very excited about it, which is great because I opened up every single one. He is a professor of anatomy and anthropology at the Department of Biological Science at Idaho State University. Please welcome Dr. Jeff Meldrum. How are you, Jeff?
Great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. We've worked hard to get you on, and now we got a little time. Time restraints. This is going to be a little shorter episode, but we're going to get into it. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into the Bigfoot business?
Right. Well, as you said, my day job, if you will, is teaching human gross anatomy in the health professions programs, and I also research questions relating to the evolution of human bipedalism, how it is we came to walk on 2 legs. And that's kind of the nexus point. That's where the interest in another bipedal primate came into focus. So as an academic, this involved me literally crossing paths with a long line of tracks left presumably, ostensibly by a Sasquatch. And the more I scrutinized them, the more I examined them, investigated them, the more convinced I was that, yeah, this was the real deal. That was in 1996. And now some 3 years later, I've got over 300 examples of footprint casts from all over the world, in fact, in my lab. That's been one of the principal pieces of evidence that has focused my attention.
Are there any seriously credible anthropologists doing research about Sasquatch right now?
Well, there are a few of us that are openly and actively doing that. One of my closer colleagues was Dr. John Bindernagel, who unfortunately passed away here shortly, less than a year ago. He was a wildlife biologist in British Columbia, Canada, in semi-retirement. I work behind the scenes with a lot of academics, though. I edit a online scholarly journal, which is a great means by which I can sort of recruit other academics to either submit original research or to review and comment upon others' research. And it provides a great platform for the promoting of the discussion of this when normal channels of scientific discourse are sometimes less open to the possibility, less willing to devote time and space to the discussion of these questions, which they see as less than meritorious, I guess you'd say.
What would if we had to categorize what Bigfoot is? We've heard a lot of different discussions. I've heard people say, oh, it might just be a bear that's wounded and it's walking upright. Some might say it's an Armenian who's lost in the forest. Some think it's a time-traveling, interdimensional being. What if you had to say what is Bigfoot?
Right. Well, you've touched on quite a few of the various propositions, and we could add even more, and even some even more outlandish than those. I'm approaching this as a. Oops, sorry about that.
That's all right. I love landlines.
I'm approaching this as a biologist, as an anthropologist first and foremost, and so according to the strictures of the scientific method, we have to start with the simplest explanation first, persistent one, and start with that first. Then we can go to more complicated ones. And so we first have to do that. Turn that down.
It's fine. It's all good.
Okay. So
we expect that on the show.
Yeah, that. But so basically, it boils down to a question of, where does it fit in? Is there a context? Do you have to resort to some extraordinary explanation of something dropping out of the ether? And I don't think you do. I mean, we're learning that our family tree was very complicated. It was very bushy. Just recently, there was the discovery of another species to add to that family tree, a species of diminutive hominin in the Philippines that was only about 3 to 4 feet tall. And that's just one more branch on this very bushy family tree. And several of those branches have persisted until more recently than we would have ever acknowledged just 20 years ago. And so I think that's what Sasquatch is. I think it's one of the branches of that tree that is on this planet living right alongside us, but being very rare, very elusive, very reclusive. And as such, it has escaped recognition. I mean, we didn't discover the mountain gorilla until the 20th century. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that something could have escaped our attention until this point.
There are giant forests and jungles which we've never really explored at all. And we actually find civilizations of just human beings, like tribes that we've never seen before, never heard before, didn't know they existed until recently. I think they just found a new tribe in South America that they didn't know existed, and what are there different realms? So anything is possible. I mean, like we just like as we go deeper into the ocean, we find more and more exotic sea life that we didn't even know existed. Just like stuff that's from sci-fi and even our nightmares. You're like, oh my God, that's on this planet. That's mind blowing. So I could see how this could happen. We just found another, I forget the name of the species of animal, but it was supposed to be extinct, and then this fox just came out of nowhere, I think it was, and it was back. And the world is such an insane mystery.
Would you say that Sasquatch, Yeti, and Bigfoot are the same thing?
No, I think that they would represent different branches.
Oh, really?
On this tree. So yeah, my expertise is the footprints, and the adaptations exhibited there. For example, if you look at the Sasquatch foot, it has a non-divergent big toe, and it has retains a rather flexible midfoot, but it superficially more resembles a human foot. There you go. The Yeti footprint, on the other hand, looks essentially like a chunky chimpanzee. I mean, it has a stocky, divergent big toe with shorter lateral toes, but it clearly retains those adaptations for tree climbing that we find in the other great apes. We could turn to Russia, where the reports of the almas, the almasti, the kaptar, these descriptions are much more human-like in many respects. They're covered with hair from head to toe, but they have behaviors and anatomies, including the foot, which has an arch, which has a broad but arched foot that is very reminiscent of footprints we associate with Neanderthals from cave sites in Europe. So it's possible that there are multiple branches on this bushy tree that have persisted into the very recent past.
Have you been called into some places and just been shocked by what you've heard? Like, I'm sure there are some people call you in aren't that credible, and you gotta go, okay, this doesn't seem like a journey I want to go down to investigate. But have there been some where you're just like, wow, this is like gold. We've hit the mother lode of what we're discovering. Are there any instances that really stand out in your head?
Oh, sure. I mean, one that was just very resoundingly confirming in my mind was when I had the chance to go to China. The Chinese have traditions about a Sasquatch-like creature, remarkably similar in description and in the footprints that they leave, and called the Yeren, the wild man, literally. And one witness that we were able to interview had wrapped up in his little suitcase some footprint casts that he had made. And once they had everything set, the cameras rolling so they could capture my initial reaction, he unveils these and lifts them out. And I was just flabbergasted because they were almost identical to some examples of footprints that I was very familiar with here from North America, from California in particular. In fact, those that were associated with the notorious Patterson-Gimlin film, that piece of footage you've probably seen, if you've seen a video or a film of Bigfoot, that one is the preeminent example. And here was an example on the other side of the Pacific that not only showed the same size, shape, proportions, but details of the anatomy as reflected in this distinctive, what we call the mid-tarsal pressure ridge, a feature that is indicative of the flexibility retained in this foot. Now, how this guy could have faked this, I mean, if you're going to resort to that, he had no knowledge of the Sasquatch. He had no access to Western television and all the documentaries and so forth that are available here that might have, informed him of what to incorporate into a hoax. And yet, here we have these two examples that were remarkably convergent. That was pretty astounding to me. And yet, unfortunately, it bounces off the facade of the existing paradigms in anthropology and hardly makes an impact, or it's not very visible one.
I find that anything that doesn't follow the status quo gets dismissed instantly. Anything that doesn't allow our paradigms of what we've been trained or brainwashed into believing gets dismissed instantly. If it's a video, it gets dismissed. If it's a picture, it's a Photoshop. It's just, if it doesn't fit within the realms of the laws of physics or anything like that, even though we see stuff over and over and over again, that lets you know this is such a complex universe we live in. If it's not the status quo, they don't want to hear about it. And if you preach status quo, you get pushed forward and celebrated as the guy who's telling us what we already know. Yay! They really love that. I know that you focus more on the foot and the footprint. What I would like to know are what are some of the characteristics of a Bigfoot that might stand out that makes him different than either of a mountain gorilla or a bear and a humanoid or human of any sorts? What makes it different than everybody from size to how they walk or anything unusual about that?
Right. Well, yes, superficially they resemble us in their upright posture and their habit of walking on two legs. They show adaptations for that are similar to those in humans. For example, elongation of the hind limbs, not to the extent we see in most humans today, but nevertheless, likewise, as I pointed out, they have that non-divergent big toe that is also a hallmark of bipedalism. But at that point, the resemblances kind of stop. Because otherwise, then they look essentially like a great ape. They're covered with hair. They have a smaller brain capacity. They have these remarkably heavy, deep jaws with squared off teeth. In that respect, they're more hominin-like, I guess, because the great apes, present these long canines. It's kind of interesting when the Patterson-Gimlin film was first viewed by some of the experts at the Smithsonian Institute back in 1967, 68, they one of the more open-minded ones, admittedly more open-minded ones, still said he had trouble because when you looked at it from the waist up, it looks like an ape, essentially like a gorilla with long legs like a typical human. And he said it's almost inconceivable in my mind, he said, that such a combination of traits would exist in nature. It just went against, as you said earlier, against the status quo, against the paradigm. And on that basis, largely, he rejected. He said it has to be fake. Well, it's interesting because had he waited, he made those pronouncements in a book that he published. To his credit, he at least took the time and effort to really research it and wrote a very interesting book for its time back in about 1972, I think it was. If he'd waited just a few more years, he would have witnessed the discovery of the famous Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, one of these early upright walking bipedal hominid ancestors. And yet, how did the popular press describe her? From the waist up, she looks essentially like a chimpanzee. From the waist down, she looks like a little hairy human. Isn't it interesting how these unexpected combinations of characteristics are found in these early bipedal hominids? Well, now, wait a minute. Just 5 years ago, that was the basis for this researcher, John Napier, to reject the Patterson-Gimlin film and the existence of Sasquatch almost outright. And yet, if he had, how would his book have turned out if he'd waited a decade later to write that, And that's one of the interesting things is...
For sure.
Sasquatch, if I took a picture like you just posted, if I took that picture from the Patterson-Gimlin film and used that to illustrate an early, robust Australopithecine, disregarding the size, but just the appearance of it, I could stick it in an introductory anthropology text and most people wouldn't bat an eye if they weren't familiar with where that picture came from. But that brings up another point in asking for a description. That female Bigfoot there from Northern California is estimated to be just under 7 feet in height, probably weighing about 600 to 800 pounds.
Shot some tits on her.
Yeah, it sounds like it looks like Zion Williams, dude, just like 6'7", 300. Damn.
Yeah. Well, double that weight.
Yeah.
If you have a male with a 16-inch, her foot was just over 14 and a half to 15 inches. A male foot is probably between 16 to 18 inches in length, probably stands upwards of 8.5 feet in height, and probably weighs anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 pounds.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
That's like a moose.
yeah.
You imagine a moose standing up and walking across that sandbar.
So it's obviously I mean, like, we're talking 800 to 1,200 pounds. How do we know anything about how it eats, how it hunts? Is it a carnivore? Is it is it a vegan hipster? Like what do we know about its eating patterns? Does it hunt in packs? Does it hunt by itself? Have we ever seen any of these beings in a pack together, working together, like we've saw through human history and in the animal kingdom?
Right. Well, the vast majority of sightings and footprint finds would suggest solitary individuals, and that's I suspect is the prevalent status of these creatures. Their social structure is semi-solitary, and they probably only interact on rare occasions. But as you point out, some people have indicated occasions where there have been multiples, more than one. And I suspect that's probably, a male and a female that may have some dependent offspring, but enough time has transpired. She's ready to, hook up with the beau on the block here again. And so they may have seen kind of a transient family group, if you will, or social group. As far as their diet, based on the eyewitness reports, they seem to be omnivores. That is, they eat everything from roots and berries right on up to deer and elk. And that would make sense given their size and their evolutionary history. I mean, derived from another large ape, probably of some form, or an early hominin that it had included more meat in its diet. So, yeah, they probably have to forage over a wide range in order to find sufficient resources to support that bulk, but it's not out of the realm of possibility at all. Like I said, there are other animals, big brown bears, grizzly bears, deer, elk, moose that are pushing the limits of that body mass, that size, and there's an advantage to being bigger. When you're larger like that, you can get by on less rich foodstuffs, because your large size allows for more surface area for digestion and absorption, and a slower gut passage time to allow for those things to be properly digested. So the ecology is there. I mean, that's the thing. We go back to that notion of context. You don't have to put on a tinfoil hat in order to imagine.
But we wouldn't be mad at you if you did.
Things came from. Right. But there's an absolutely sensible, rational explanation as a biological species, just one that is extremely rare and smarter than your average bear and able to elude human contact when they want to.
Have we seen any evidence of, like, animals that have been kind of hunted and killed by Bigfoot? Have they found remains of any kind of, like, battles where, like, this animal sustained a scar or a wound that does not fit any of the animals that we know would do? Like, that does not look like a bear attack to me.
Right.
There has to be something else. Have we seen any of those?
There are things that are suggestive, not definitive or conclusive by any means, but for example, deer kills where the head has literally been corkscrewed, twisted to the point that the cervical vertebrae are fractured, which is not the way most animals, most predators, common predators.
You're talking it snap. It's like what Bruce Lee used to do to all the bad guys in the dojo.
Yeah.
He would just go, "Gah!" like that.
Twisting the neck, to the point that the neck vertebrae break. Yeah.
Holy cow, dude!
That's one possibility. There's other signs. I mean, for example, up in British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest, one of the names applied to this is the eater of cockles. These shellfish, and they'll find on the beach piles of the shucked shells that they've gone through, which no other animal does. I mean, no other animal except humans, for that matter, I guess, piles them up like this. So there's some indirect evidence that points to some of the things that they very likely eat. One famous account, a witness watched a Sasquatch digging through a talus pile, that slope of loose rock, and as he'd lift a rock up and smell the undersurface, stack it over to the side, and then when he got sent, he just started pulling rocks out right and left until he dug a 6-foot hole and came up with a grass nest from which he extricated a sleeping rodent and ate it like a hot dog, just a hole, biting it right down. So,
well, look what he did to
very
that deer.
interesting report.
So can we look at this picture real quick?
Look at this one. No, look at that one.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Man, nature could be violent, huh? Man.
Well, sure. I mean, if you think about it, it's said that a chimpanzee has the strength of 5 men. They can sit and hold themselves up. I've watched a chimpanzee support his weight from the ledge of a window with just one fingertip, basically. So they're capable. If you imagine that a chimp weighing a couple 100 pounds has the strength of 5 men, how strong, if a Sasquatch retains that kind of muscle physiology, how strong would an 800 or 1,000-pound Sasquatch be? I mean, it pulling the haunches off a deer like that, disemboweling it with its fingers, with its hands, wouldn't be an extraordinary feat at all. That'd be like you pulling the skin off a rabbit.
Yeah, I want to get into the discovery of what happened, what was just found in the Philippines. But before I do, I want to tell you about our good friends at Lucy.co. If you're looking for a boost of nicotine that you can enjoy anywhere without inhaling any smoke or vape, check out the powerful, long-lasting flavors of Lucy gum, available at Lucy.co. That's Lucy, D-O-T-C-O. The product was designed by a team of scientists from Harvard, Stanford, and Caltech who were looking for a cleaner way to consume nicotine than smoking cigarettes and inhaling clouds of a fruity vapor. Lucy is clean nicotine absorbed through the mouth in 3 delicious flavors. Just chew it for a few times and then let it sit against your gums. Believe me, I chew it like regular gum the first time, and the nicotine hit me hard. My head was spinning. Boom. I do it once in a while just to feel dangerous.
They got good flavors. They got a bunch
They
of
do have a
different
bunch of good flavors. Look
Yeah.
at those. It's like, dude, stop smoking cigarettes. It's the number one way to age. If you smoke, vape, chew, you should consider making the switch to Lucy. Not only does the product give you a nicotine that you want along with great flavor, but you can literally use the product anywhere you can chew gum. The office, when you're traveling on a plane, Uber, or Subway, or even around people who would normally judge you. So use the discount code TINFOIL to get $10 off your first purchase at lucy.co. That's lucy.co. So thank you to Lucy for sponsoring the show. I want to get into the recent announcement of the discovery in the Philippines. You had mentioned it earlier. What did we find in the Philippines?
Well, they found a few bits and pieces of bone, some hand bones, finger bones, that is, a couple of foot bones. There was a fragment of a pelvis and a femur, as I recall. They've been attributed to a new species, Homo, and that remains to be seen if that's warranted. Homo luzonensis, for the island of Luzon in the northern Philippines. It probably only stood about 3 to 4 feet tall, so it's very reminiscent of Homo floresiensis, just not far away to the west in Indonesia, which also is a very small hominin. Luzonensis is interesting because the fingers and toes, while they were shortened, they weren't as ape-like as, say, in a chimp or a gorilla. they still are remarkably curved and have very strong markings for the attachments of the retaining bands that hold the flexor tendons. In other words, they were powerful. They had a powerful grip, which we only find in primates that are climbers. So this little 3 to 4 foot hominin was definitely spending a lot of time climbing in trees, and remains to be seen whether they had a cranial capacity that was on par with that of other Homo. Floresiensis has remained somewhat controversial because even though it's attributed to Homo, it has a brain the size of a chimpanzee.
So how many different types of humans? How many? There's Homo sapiens. How many of those are there?
Well, now in that family group, since the divergence from a common ancestor shared with chimps, there are literally dozens now, and that's the point I was making earlier. Is we continually add, not quite on an annual basis, but almost a new species every year, and so it has just grown and grown. So at any slice of time in the past, you might have half a dozen contemporaneous species living across the landscape. If you could jump in a time machine and go back just 30,000 years to East Africa, you might encounter Homo heidelbergensis, Homo floresiensis, now Homo luzonensis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, Homo denisovan, if that still eventually will become a distinctive species, which I'm quite sure it will. So there's a half dozen right there. It's like, who was it? One person said it's like the world of the Lord of the Rings. There were all kinds of two-legged creatures walking around the landscape.
It's unbelievable.
And that raises the question, why would the present be the exception to that rule? I don't think it is.
And why do people push so hard against it? That's the weirdest thing. Like, how many times have we been lied to through the media and all this stuff? And even parts of science has straight up BS'd us. Yet this one thing really in this, in life isn't going to make your world any better or any worse. Doesn't really have an effect on your daily life. Seems to be pushed back so hard. Like, what was the first evidence you saw in your own personal life when you were like, okay, this is something, and it's very interesting, and it's not just a fuzzy picture. There's more to this. What was the first credible evidence you saw?
Well, the first personal experience I had was in '96, and as I mentioned, coming face to face with a long line of footprints. That was in southeastern Washington, and I was shown those by a witness, and so I was a little dubious and doubtful of what was laid before me. But the more I looked at it, it really sank in. I mean, as I looked at the details that were evident there, the animation of this trackway and these individual footprints, it was like, how could this person, or any person for that matter, have orchestrated this as a hoax? I mean, the subtleties of anatomy that they would have to have a mastery of, those are only had by, a dozen academics across the country, maybe a few podiatrists or orthopedic surgeons added to that list. But my experience has been they don't make the transition from human anatomy and pathology to evolutionary morphology very smoothly. So, it's kind of a small elite club, if you will, or exclusive, I won't say elite, but exclusive club of people who could pull off that kind of a fabrication. And certainly this gentleman didn't have the wherewithal at the time. I mean, as I was pointing out details of anatomy, it was going right over his head. He did not know what I was talking about. And so that then now combined with the dozens and dozens of remarkable examples that reiterate and confirm so many of those subtleties, repeatedly, it's like, who's passing out the little black book of instructions on how to fake a Bigfoot track?
Yeah. But the ones that you have seen that, obviously you've been called some places and you're like, okay, this is unfortunately a hoax.
Right.
How many times that happened to you, and why do you think people would do that?
Right. Well, my experience has been that the majority of superfluous items are misidentifications.
Interesting.
You alluded to seeing a bear, for example. It's people reading too much or over-interpreting things that they come upon. So a pothole that has a vaguely oval outline suddenly becomes a footprint, or a bear track that is not as clear and distinct, but those toes sure look are eye-catching. That becomes a Bigfoot track. Likewise, as you point out, with so many of the photographs, the term blob squatch has a basis in the fact that so many very poor quality, unfocused, sketchy images are attributed to Sasquatch. The overt hoaxes are much less frequent. I mean, because thankfully most people have better things to do. Right. With their lives, than those few pathetic individual instances. And so, for whatever reason, some people take it on as a challenge to try to prove that they can fool someone like me, or they just get a kick. They get a kick out of the attention that it brings to them. Are motivated to try to do something like this, and I think most overt hoaxes are quite transparent, and it's usually the Bigfoot researchers are the ones that expose them for what they are very quickly, as has been the case with a number of, for example, footprint hoaxes over the past couple of 2 or 3 years.
So, what we see is that there's just people who just mistake infamy for fame. We see people who kind of get off on pulling one over, within the dating website services. It's called catfishing, where like a man will pretend he's a woman and see how long he could go and see how much information he extract from somebody else on the other line. And then It's just a weird thing that people get off on. Like, it's just like some people just enjoy pulling cons. They just enjoy it. And they just think it's funny to have somebody come out and do all this stuff and see how far they can go with it. But inevitably, it always crashes and burns on these people. And you want to feel sorry for them, but part of me just does it because it's really just unnecessary. And you're just making it's unnecessary, and you're just making something that is incredibly hard even harder.
Well, right. And especially as you point out, the reaction of institutional, of mainstream science, that simply is throwing gas on the fire. It just steals the resistance and the rejection as being, this being unorthodox, unscientific, because it just muddies the water. It really, it's unfortunate that instead of going out and being able to evaluate data, evaluate evidence, the first thing I have to do is to assess it and evaluate whether it's legitimate or whether it's hoaxed, and it's it's bothersome.
How many Bigfoots would you say there is in North America? If you had to give
that's a great question.
You got to give like a crazy
on
estimate.
Fire today.
And the number, I'm rather conservative in that estimate. In all of North America, as you put it, I would limit it to just a couple of thousand, maybe 3,000. In my state of Idaho, which has more wilderness than any of the other lower 48, I put the number at about 200 to 300.
In your state alone?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, to put that in perspective, in Idaho, it's estimated there are 25 to 35,000 black bear. So 100-fold more black bear. Now you just think about it, and that's a useful concept because you think about how difficult it is to find evidence of black bear in the wild. It's a challenge. They're pretty elusive. They call them the ghost bears here or shadows of the forest. That is one of the nicknames. There's a book by that name about bear biology in Idaho. If you're a hunter, unless you have hounds or you are able to bait the bears, they would be a really challenging quarry to hunt down. So take that 100-fold and transpose that to a Sasquatch, which has the intelligence of a primate, a grade ape at least, if not more, much more than a bear, and are much more far-ranging or bipedal and so forth. It's not that surprising. It's really not that surprising that they have remained so elusive and they're so difficult to encounter. Most of the credible encounters are purely by happenstance. They're just by chance, by random chance.
Any chance we found like remains, like bones, like let's say a Bigfoot died in the forest and luckily around that time a hunter came through and they're like, whether it's the actual flesh on the bone or the remains of a skeleton, has there ever been any skeleton remains?
They say they bury themselves.
They bury themselves?
Well, that's been suggested that they buried their dead. Yeah. That's a little hard to rationalize if they are as solitary and singular in their movements and habits. I mean, I guess it's possible if one gets sick, he calls out or she calls out for some assistance. But I think it's just the rarity. When again, go back to the bear example. One of my colleagues, Dr. Grover Krantz, an anthropologist at Washington State, used to make the habit when he was speaking in public of asking people, "How many of you have ever found the skeleton or skull even of a bear in the wild that had died a natural death or that was that died a natural death, that wasn't shot by a hunter or killed by a roadkill?" And in decades of asking that, he got almost no positive responses. Well, why is that? Well, because top predators, when they get old and decrepit, they secrete themselves off to some nook or cranny to die, and they're quickly disposed of. I mean, you think about, one of my friends was from Wisconsin, and he checked with their Department of Natural Resources, and they estimated about 10,000 deer died every winter of winter kill. 10,000 deer, and yet you go out hiking, and then similar numbers are probably true throughout the Intermountain West and so forth. If you go out hiking, you don't stumble over all these remains of the thousands and thousands of deer, because they get chewed up, decomposed, they get dissolved by the acidic soil and so forth. It's just the way nature takes care of things, cleans up after itself. So, 100-fold more, 1,000-fold more deer, 100-fold more bear of Sasquatch. When this Sasquatch finally dies, probably lives much longer than a bear or certainly than a deer. What are the odds of finding those remains? But unfortunately, we haven't found anything.
It's
eventually, I think somebody's going to crawl into a cave or a den and find a bone that way. But
so I see that your book, the cover has been endorsed by Jane Goodall. How did that all occur? How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, by chance, she happened to have had an interview on NPR, and a caller got past the screeners and asked her a question about Sasquatch, and she's quite fascinated by the question. Has talked to a lot of Native Americans as well as other witnesses, and so I figured, hey, I'll give it a shot, and I sent the manuscript copy to her. It got to her, and she had a chance to read it, and she was gracious enough to offer an endorsement. And it's been fantastic. I had a chance to go and to hear her speak at Humboldt State University, and had a chance to visit with her briefly. So I have a copy of my book with her signature across the front. in silver Sharpie right above her endorsement.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was. It really was gratifying because, she doesn't endorse the existence of Sasquatch, but she endorses the pursuit of the question of whether Sasquatch exists or not. And that was fantastic, yeah.
Amongst your peers, how is this subject perceived?
Right. Well, it spans the entire gambit, as you might expect, I guess. Scientists are a community of people with their own opinions and biases and prejudices. And so I have colleagues who are absolutely enthralled and curious and inquisitive about it. And then on the opposite extreme, there are those that are just that have a visceral, irrational rejection of it, outright just, this pushback that you were describing so aptly. And that, whether we're looking at the department here that I work in, or my university community, or the entire discipline, and scientific community at large, that same spectrum of reaction is in effect.
How important within our we're in the conspiracy realm. I call it spiritual skepticism of the official narrative. We like to investigate. The lifeblood of this genre that we live in is amateurs doing just research for the love of just knowledge. And how important is that into your world, into Bigfoot? And how, if someone wanted to get involved, how could they do it?
Well, it's very much so. In fact, I'm a strong advocate of what is sometimes called citizen science. That
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and that was one of the motivations. I wrote a field guide, and the intent of the field guide was to provide some of that how-to information. How do I discriminate between a Sasquatch footprint and a bear track, for example? Or how do I make a footprint cast? How do I document that? Or collect that hair? What do I do with that scat, etc.? And, it's important. As I said, most encounters are by happenstance. They're by chance. So the prospects of me going out in the field and look at my track record. I've been out there for 22 years, and I have maybe a half dozen footprint finds, and I've heard a few vocalizations. I may have figuratively bumped into one, had something brush against my tent, or approached camp just outside of the campfire light.
Really?
Yeah.
What was that like? That'd be thrilling.
It was exciting. It was, and those have been kind of bookends. The one brushing against the tent was on one of the first expeditions I was on, and that was corroborated by 16-inch footprints.
Whoa.
The other was much more recently, where we caught a glimpse of something. We caught a glimpse of something. I think we're just about out of time.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's my next interview.
Okay.
Trying to reach me.
I just want to end on this. Where do you go? When is enough is enough? I mean, you're like the Dan Marino of Bigfoot. He went to the Super Bowl his rookie year, and now it's been a while later, and you thought probably the first time you went out, you got real close. You thought this was going to happen all the time, and now over 22 years, I don't know if you've gotten so close like you did before. When's enough's enough? What's it going to take to go to the next level? What's your thoughts?
I've had enough ongoing affirmative experiences. I mean, there's been a lot of frustration intermingled, but enough affirmative experience and affirmative data, the footprint evidence, and there still remain things to be done. That until we have a definitive, it's hard to prove something doesn't exist. So that question will continue to linger. So it's a matter of applying more sophisticated technologies like aerial survey, thermal imaging. I'm very excited now about a project we're starting to formulate, where we're going to do a systematic eDNA, environmental DNA survey, where you can take a water sample, say from a pond in the forest, or a soil sample from a nest or a cave, and look at all the DNA that's been contributed by various animals.
Interesting. That's interesting. Well, the future sounds bright, and it sounds like you're a busy man. A lot of people want to know about the Bigfoot. And Dr. Meldrum, I appreciate you coming on. We'd love to do it again down the line and see
Sure.
if anything else has popped up or any other subjects you want to talk about. Is there anywhere you want our listeners to go check out of yours? A website, books, whatever you want. Give us a quick pitch.
Sure. The Books and Field Guide, the book Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, is probably the best primer to get started for anyone that's interested in this subject. If you want some of the latest, greatest contributions from various investigators, academic discussion, the Relic Hominoid Inquiry, the RHI, and just www.isu.edu/RHI will take you there.
All right, man. Well, you're a busy man. People want to know about the Bigfoot, so we appreciate the time you stayed with us and was able to enlighten our listeners on the whole thing. It's fascinating. I think the world's a lot more complicated than everybody believes, and I'd much rather believe in that it exists than just shoot it down because I'm scared of changing it up. And I appreciate you. Go Idaho State. In whatever tournament you guys are trying to win. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and it's going to be a wonderful week. So enjoy all the episodes, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. So long.